Hello there and welcome to another fun fact-filled video with Jason Mayfield. Fact number one, not Starbucks coffee in this mug. But it is quite good. Hey, today I want to share with you some of my thoughts on the New King James Version of the Bible. You know, almost a year ago. Matter of fact, as I'm filming this, I believe it was 2 years ago. Or 1 year ago in 2 days. 363 days ago. Is any of this math making any sense whatsoever? A while back, I filmed a video called Why I Chose the ESV over the NASB, or something to that extent. And from that video, most of you, and those of you that have been hanging out with me for a while, know that I primarily use the ESV. I really love the NASB. And I don't really spend a lot of time in other translations. As a matter of fact, the only other translation that I've kind of spent a significant amount of time in was the New Living Translation, and that was prior to going to NASB when I was in high school. You know, that was back in the day. I was on that NLT life. That being said, the New King James Version is something that I just want to talk about because I do get questions about it. I get questions about the CSB and the NKJV a lot, and then I also get a lot of hateful comments about the KJV. And I just want to thank you guys for making sure that my algorithm's working good. Every time that you post a hateful comment, it actually helps. That being said, I want to give you some of my thoughts on the New King James Version today, just because, heck, I figure you're curious. So, let's talk about it for a couple of minutes. Number one, my thoughts on the New King James Version start here. I believe it is a good translation. I don't have any problems with it. Any issues that I do have, I'll certainly mention as we go along, but for the most part, I believe it's a really, really good translation. It's solid. If you use it, you are not living a life that is full of deception. If you're using the New King James Version, you have not been submitted to the text of the false prophets. No, I believe it's a great translation of Scripture, and I trust it. I have a measure of trust in the New King James Version, just like I do in the ESV, the NASB. I believe it is a great translation. And one of the first things that I really like about it, it's a great translation to get people, this probably doesn't sound the way I want it to, but get people away from the King James Version. Or if you're looking to transition from the King James Version, the NKJV is a really good step because primarily it was an updated version of the King James version of the Bible. So it's not a big leap from the KJV. So I like it because it'll help you do that if you want to update. Also, let me go ahead and throw this in. If you use the King James Version, I would encourage you to update. I'm not going to talk about that here, but I am going to do a video in the future on some of my concerns with the King James Version. It is a treasured jewel in the treasury of God's work in the earth. But it's also really hard to understand, but that's neither here nor there. We'll talk about that in another video. So it's a great transition from the King James Version of the Bible. Second thing I like about it, it is a formal equivalence Bible or a formal equivalence translation. They call it a complete equivalence. I think they're just trying to fancy it up, to be honest with you, but if you're looking at the thought for thought to word for word scale, it leans more towards the word for word. It is not quite as literal or quite as formal as the NASB or the ESV, but it is a really good, it leans on that side. And you know, one of the things that they say in the preface of the New King James Version that I really like is they say we want to be faithful to God and faithful to our readers, because we want to make sure that we represent God well, but we also understand that people need to actually be able to read this book. And so I believe that they manage that very well. And what they don't manage super great, or what they might miss, because the text is based on the Textus Receptus in the New Testament, and obviously we know that we have many more manuscripts that we can bounce the accuracy of Scripture off of now. That being said, number three, I really like this, they own it all in the footnotes. Honey, if you like footnotes, you're going to love the New King James Version. They got footnotes for days, and they will talk about the different manuscript groups pretty freely. They will let you know this is in this one, this isn't in this one, this is in two of them, this isn't in this. So they're very honest with that. So if you are afraid of reading a translation and not having the full scope of information on where the source text lands on what's being translated, they're going to let you know. And not only do they have the footnotes, they also have italics. Those of you that have seen my ESV versus NASB video, you know that I really do wish the ESV had italics. But if it had it, I probably wouldn't like it as much, because the ESV, you know, a lot of it is a visual experience, and those italics do take away. And I will say, if you're reading a New King James Version, you're going to be overwhelmed with a lot of italics and footnotes and cross-references and stuff. It's full of stuff. You're going to have letters and numbers and italics and formatting all over the place with the New King James. But if you want to be certain about where things come from and what may, the New King James Version is going to hook you up with that. So even though they lean or they use the Textus Receptus, what I really do like that they do is they own it in the footnotes over and over and over again. So they will really help you out if you want to know how that compares to everything else. And one of the silly things that I really like about the New King James Version that probably isn't, I don't even know that I could validate this or prove it, it's more of a feeling with the New King James Version, is that it just kind of sounds spiritual compared to the ESV or the NASB, which I think the NASB sounds more spiritual than the ESV. Now, I know that's a goofy sounding phrase, but there's just something about when you read it, it's less academic, and sometimes it just has a little more power to it. So for instance, I've got a comparison here on just one verse from the New King James Version and the ESV, which is Romans 12:16. In the ESV, it says, live in harmony with one another, which is pretty straightforward, makes sense. Not a big variation from what's written in the text. Live in harmony with one another is a great rendering of that passage, possibly even a better rendering of that passage. But in the New King James Version, it says, be of the same mind toward one another. And just, you feel that when you slow it down. Be of the same mind toward one another. It just sounds spiritual. And so being from a Pentecostal charismatic background, you know, sometimes you just like, it sounds stupid, and I get that, but sometimes you just like when those things just sound a little more spiritual. Granted, that can also be a strike against it, because it can make the distance between what I'm reading and accurately understanding it a little bit longer, and some people never quite make that jump. So that being said, those are my thoughts on the New King James Version. I think it's a great translation. I think you could pick one up and be super happy with it. You won't be misled. The text, in terms of the footnotes, the cross-references, whatever it has in there, the italics, you're going to really understand what's going on with the original manuscripts, even though it's based on the Textus Receptus. So I really like the New King James Version. So why don't I use it? Well, it basically comes down to, I've never had one. Well, actually I do. I have a little Precious Moments one, and I thought it was a King James Version until I was looking at it one day, and it's actually a New King James Version. But I've never had one. I've never really used it. You know, when I got saved, everybody was using the NIV, and then the NLT came out, and it was a big deal. So I got an NLT and cut my teeth there until I really decided I wanted that super accurate, literal, formal equivalence, and then I went to the NASB. And then just over time, I decided I wanted to try the ESV, and it was a real challenge for me there to go from NASB to ESV. I like the ESV a lot. I like the NASB a lot. And I kind of wish I could just marry a hybrid of the two. That would be wonderful. But so all that to say, I've just never used the New King James Version. I've actually thought about it in recent days. Should I make that transition over? Tribally for me, being in the Pentecostal charismatic circle, the NKJV probably comes off a little better in our circles and in our churches. But I like the ESV, and I'm kind of just planted my flag there that's what I use. And if something really great comes out, I may transition over. And then again, the next video you see, I could be a full-on NKJV user. But today, I'm not. But it's a really good translation, and I highly recommend it. So listen, hey, if you like videos like this, make sure that you like, you comment, you subscribe. Click that little bell so you get notified anytime I post a new video. And I will see you in the next video.